I used to tell myself I was gambling for my daughter. That was the lie that kept everything moving. I wasn't some guy chasing sports bets in bars or blowing money in Vegas. I was a 35-year-old widower trying to keep a roof over my little girl's head. That's what I told myself when I clicked on the first casino ad. That's what I told myself when I won. That's what I told myself when I started losing. And that's what I told myself when I sold our car, then our house, and still kept playing. My daughter was 6 years old when child services took her. The worst part is that she didn't leave crying. She left confused. My name is Marcus. I'm 35, black, from Baltimore, and for most of my adult life I thought I understood what rock bottom looked like. I thought it was the day my wife died. Danielle was killed in a car accident 3 years ago. Some guy ran a red light in the rain, and by the time I got to the hospital, all I was really doing was hearing doctors use soft voices and watching my whole life split in half. Our daughter Nia was 3 then. She's 6 now. She was too young to understand death when it happened. She kept asking when Mommy was coming home. For months after the funeral, she would leave little things by the front door for Danielle. A drawing, a sock, a toy ring, like her mother might walk in at any moment and need them. That kind of grief does something to a house. It changes the air. After Danielle died, everything in my life became about survival and routine. Wake up, get Nia ready, get to work, pick her up, make dinner, bath time, story, bed. Then sit in the dark for an hour, pretending I was resting when really I was just trying not to think. I worked maintenance for a property management company. Nothing glamorous. Repairs, inspections, emergency calls, angry tenants when something broke, and long days on my feet. I made decent money, not great money, enough to keep us afloat if nothing went wrong. But things always went wrong. There was the mortgage on our small row house, the old Chevy Malibu that sounded worse every winter, school clothes, groceries, medical bills, a furnace that needed work, a bathroom sink that leaked if you looked at it the wrong way. The house wasn't much, but it was ours. Nia's room had lavender walls because Danielle had wanted something soft but cheerful. There were little gold stars stuck to the ceiling over her bed. Danielle had put those there when Nia was a baby. I couldn't afford to move. I also couldn't really afford to stay. That was my life, in one sentence. My neighbor, Mrs. Evelyn Carter, helped more than I can ever repay. She was in her 60s, retired, widowed, and lived 2 doors down. She'd known Danielle. After the funeral, she started checking on us in that quiet older woman way where she doesn't ask if you need help, she just brings over soup and takes the trash cans back up for you. When Nia started kindergarten, Mrs. Carter became a lifeline. If I got stuck at work, she picked Nia up from aftercare. If school was closed and I had to work, she watched her for a few hours. Nia loved her, called her Miss Evelyn, sat at her kitchen table coloring while Mrs. Carter made grilled cheese. If I'm being honest, there were days I felt like Mrs. Carter was the only reason I managed to look like a functioning father. I loved my daughter. That was never the problem. The problem was that love doesn't automatically make you stable, or smart, or rested, or financially secure. I was exhausted all the time. I was scared all the time. And underneath all of it was this constant shame that I wasn't giving Nia the life Danielle would have wanted for her. I remember one Saturday morning, Nia asked why some kids in her class had the big houses with stairs in the front, and we didn't. I laughed it off. But after she went to bed that night, I sat in our living room and thought, I am working my ass off, and I still can't get ahead. That feeling was already in me before I ever gambled. That's important, because the casino didn't create the desperation. It just offered it a costume. The first time I heard about online casino money, it came from a guy at work named Reggie. He wasn't a bad guy. Loud, always on his phone, always claiming he had a system for everything. One afternoon during lunch, he showed me his screen and said he'd turned $50 into almost $2,000 on some slot app. I laughed at him. "That's not real." "It is if it hits your account," he said. I remember exactly how he phrased it because it stuck with me. "It is if it hits your account." A few days later, I saw one of those casino ads while scrolling on my phone after Nia went to bed. Welcome bonus. Free spins. New players get matched deposits. I should have kept scrolling. But it was late. I was tired. The car had just failed inspection. I needed new brakes. Nia's school had sent home a reminder about a field trip fee. My mortgage payment was due in 4 days. I told myself I wasn't a gambling person. That was how I justified downloading the app. I deposited $40. I played a few slots that looked like cartoons designed to make adults feel dumber than they were. Bright colors, coins, stupid little celebration sounds. I lost most of the money, then won some back, then almost closed the app. Then I hit a bonus round. My balance jumped. 40 became 200. 200 became 600. I sat up on the couch. Then I hit again. By the end of the night, I had just over $2,100. I withdrew most of it because I genuinely didn't believe it would still be there in the morning. When the money hit my account 2 days later, I felt this weird mixture of relief and power. I paid for the car repairs. I bought Nia a new bike because she had outgrown the old one, purple with a little white basket on the front. She rode it up and down the sidewalk outside our house yelling, "Look, Daddy, look!" I got her a proper twin bed to replace the toddler-style one she was still sleeping in because I had kept putting it off. She jumped on the mattress like I'd given her a castle. That is the memory that messed me up the most later. Because gambling did not look dangerous in the beginning. It looked helpful. It looked like the only thing that had given me breathing room in months. It looked like I had finally caught a break. I told myself I would never do it again. Then, the next week, I opened the app just to check. That phrase, "just to check," started a lot of trouble. I played with $100 and won another $300. Nothing huge, but enough to keep the fantasy alive. Enough for my brain to make a connection. This helps. So I kept playing. At first, only at night after Nia was asleep. Then, some mornings before work. Then during lunch in my truck. I wasn't gambling to get rich, I told myself. I was gambling to get ahead. There's a difference, at least in the lies you tell yourself. I even used that exact logic on Mrs. Carter once, when she saw me smiling at my phone and asked what I was looking at. "Just trying to make a little extra," I said. She gave me one of those long, older person looks and said, "The fastest money usually leaves the fastest too." I laughed. I wish I had listened. The problem with early wins is that they make ordinary life feel insulting. After I won a few times, my paycheck started to look slow and humiliating. A whole week of work for what I could maybe win in an hour? That's how my brain started talking to me. At first, I still had rules. Only gamble after Nia was asleep. Never use the mortgage money. Never deposit more than I could afford. If I won enough for one bill, cash out and stop. I broke all of those rules one by one. It happened gradually enough that I always had a reason. The mortgage payment was late, but I could catch it up after a win. The utility bill bounced, but I could fix it Friday. I was a little short at the grocery store, but I had money coming. I started carrying promises in my head the way other people carry change in their pockets. The hardest part to explain is that I was still being a father through all of this. I still packed Nia's lunch, still braided the front of her hair badly because Danielle had been the one who knew how to do it right, still signed school papers, still took her to the park sometimes, still read Goodnight Moon for the 1,000th time because it was her favorite. That's what let me keep pretending I wasn't falling apart. If I were truly a bad father, wouldn't I have stopped doing those things? That was how I thought. But addiction doesn't always erase love. Sometimes it just forces love to compete with a screen. and eventually the screen wins more often than you ever imagined possible. My losses got bigger. Then so did my wins. That's what made it worse. I'd lose $300 on a Tuesday night and swear I was done. Then on Thursday I'd hit a bonus and win $1,100. The relief from that win felt so huge that it erased the pain of the loss and made me think I had been smart to keep going. That cycle became my whole emotional life. Hope, panic, relief, shame, repeat. I started using credit cards, then payday loans, then the mortgage money. The first time I missed the mortgage, I told myself it was temporary. The second time, I blamed the bank. The third time, I stopped opening the letters as soon as they came. My Chevy Malibu was old, but dependable enough. Then I started missing insurance payments, then repairs. Then one day it broke down on the side of the road with Nia in the back seat asking why the car smelled funny. I sold it 2 weeks later because I needed money. I told Nia it was because Daddy was getting things sorted out. Mrs. Carter drove us to the grocery store a few times after that. She asked more questions. I gave shorter answers. Around this time, Nia started noticing that I was on my phone a lot. Once she woke up after midnight and found me at the kitchen table staring at my screen. "Daddy?" I jumped so hard I almost dropped the phone. "What are you doing up, baby?" I had a bad dream. I picked her up and held her, and she looked over my shoulder at the screen. "Are you working?" That question hurt because it gave me an excuse. "Yeah?" I said. "A little." She laid her head on my chest and fell asleep while cartoon slot music kept flashing silently from my phone. I carried her back to bed, then went right back to the kitchen and kept playing. That's the kind of sentence that makes me hate myself even now. Things got uglier after I sold the car because I used most of that money on gambling too. I told myself I was trying to turn it into enough for a better used car, or maybe enough to catch up on the mortgage and buy a different one later. Every lie I told myself wore Nia's face as protection. I'm doing this for her. That lie is poison. The biggest turning point came when I sold the house. It sounds insane when I say it plainly, but it didn't feel insane at the time. I was behind enough on payments that foreclosure felt possible. A guy at work knew a realtor who said if I sold fast, I could at least walk away with some equity instead of losing everything to the bank. So I did it. I sold the house where my daughter was born. The house with Danielle's handwriting still on a grocery list, stuck inside a kitchen drawer. The house with the little gold stars on Nia's ceiling. After paying off what I owed, I had a little under $39,000 left. That should have been our reset. Instead, I saw it as my last chance. I found a small apartment listing and even filled out part of the application, but I didn't submit it. I told myself I needed just a little more money to cover the deposit, moving costs, and have a cushion. Mrs. Carter let us stay in her spare room for a couple weeks while I got things lined up. I truly believed that was what was happening. For about 3 days. Then I started playing with the house money. I didn't mean to lose it all. No addict ever does. I won it first. Of course I did. Enough to make me think I was being smart. Enough to make me think I was turning one last desperate move into a comeback story. Then I lost. Then I chased. Then I lost more. By the time I realized I had burned through almost half of it, I was too deep to admit it. So I played harder. One night, while Nia slept in Mrs. Carter's guest room, I sat in my truck outside a 24-hour laundromat using their Wi-Fi because Mrs. Carter had started asking too many questions about why I was awake so late. That is where I lost the rest of the house money. In a parked truck, under fluorescent lights, while my daughter slept 2 doors down in someone else's house, believing her daddy was fixing things. The reason child services got involved wasn't just because I was broke. It was because I became unstable enough to make my daughter unsafe. That distinction matters. People hear stories like mine and think the state just took a child because her father was poor. That's not what happened. What happened is I started disappearing. I lost my job because I had missed too many shifts and lied too many times about why. I didn't tell Mrs. Carter. I pretended I was still going to work every morning, but really I was spending half the day at libraries, coffee shops, or parking lots, trying to gamble back the money I had lost so I could magically turn the lie back into a life. Nia stopped going to school regularly because I couldn't keep the mornings straight. I forgot appointments. I forgot picture day. I forgot to sign papers. Mrs. Carter covered for me longer than she should have. She'd feed Nia breakfast, get her on the bus, help with homework, and gently ask me if I had found an apartment yet. I started bringing home printed listings from the library just to make it look like I was trying. Then came the night that changed everything. I had been gone nearly 12 hours. I told Mrs. Carter I had an interview and then a meeting about an apartment. Really, I was sitting in a casino chat room, then driving around, then parked outside a gas station trying to turn my last few $100s into enough to pretend the day had been productive. My phone had died. When I got back, it was after midnight. Mrs. Carter was sitting at the kitchen table in her robe, waiting. Nia was asleep on the couch with a blanket over her. Mrs. Carter stood up and said, "Where have you been?" I said, "My phone died." That child cried for 2 hours. I didn't have a good answer. She looked at me for a long moment and said, "Marcus, are you gambling?" I said no. She nodded once, the way people do when they hear a lie they've already prepared themselves for. The next morning, Nia missed school again because I overslept after barely sleeping. A social worker from the school called. Mrs. Carter spoke to her because I was in the shower pretending I could still fix this. 2 days later, Child Protective Services showed up. There was a social worker named Miss Green, younger than I expected, calm, tired-looking. She asked about our housing, my employment, school attendance, childcare, and whether I had support. I lied through most of it. Mrs. Carter corrected me more than once. That was humiliating. Then Miss Green asked to speak with Nia. She sat with her in the living room and asked simple questions. Where are you sleeping? Who takes care of you? Has Daddy been sad? Does Daddy leave at night? Nia answered in that honest child way that destroys adults. He leaves a lot, she said. Miss Evelyn gives me dinner. Then she said the thing I still hear in my head sometimes when I'm trying to fall asleep. Daddy says he's trying to win us a new house. I hadn't realized she knew that phrase. Miss Green looked at me after that in a completely different way. The first decision wasn't termination of my rights. It was temporary removal. They called it emergency placement. They asked if there was family who could take her. There really wasn't anyone stable enough nearby. Mrs. Carter wanted to keep her, but because she wasn't family and had some health issues, they said it might not work long term. Nia stood by the door holding her little backpack while Miss Green explained things in a soft voice. I told Nia it was just for a little while. She asked, "Am I in trouble?" That broke me more than anything. I said, "No, baby. No." She hugged me hard. Then she got in the car with the social worker and looked back through the window like she was waiting for me to stop this. I didn't. I couldn't. Mrs. Carter cried after they left. Then she looked at me and said, "I promised Danielle I would watch out for that little girl. Tonight, that meant protecting her from you." I had never hated myself more, but even that wasn't the end. The court gave me a plan. That's the part people don't understand. They didn't take Nia forever right away. They gave me a chance. Treatment for gambling addiction, a stable job, safe housing, regular meetings with a caseworker, supervised visits, drug testing, even though drugs weren't the issue, attendance, proof, consistency. For a while, I did it. I really did. I entered treatment. I got a room in temporary housing. I found part-time work with a contractor. I started seeing Nia once a week in a visitation room with plastic toys and faded murals on the walls. Those visits destroyed me. She would run into my arms and ask, "When am I coming home?" And every single time I said, "Soon." I believed it at first. Then I relapsed. Not dramatically, not with a huge jackpot. Just $50 on my phone after a meeting. because I felt hopeless and stupid and angry that the world expected me to rebuild everything with paperwork and patience. That 50 turned into 300 lost. Then more. Then missed appointments. Then a missed visit with Nia, because I was too ashamed to show up after gambling away money I was supposed to use for rent. That was the moment everything shifted from, "This father is struggling," to, "This father may not be able to recover." It took months, not days. Hearings, warnings, another treatment referral, more chances. I failed them one by one. By the time the court moved to terminate my parental rights, Nia had been in foster care over a year. She had bonded with another family. She was stable in school. She had a room again, routine, bedtime, people she could depend on. The state didn't decide I was evil. They decided she had waited long enough. The last supervised visit before the hearing is the one that lives in my chest. Nia was 7 by then, taller, quieter, more careful with her emotions. She brought me a drawing of a house with 3 stick figures in front of it. Me, her, and Danielle, which crushed me because it meant in her mind, home still included a person who had been dead for years. I asked her if she remembered our old house. She said, "A little." Then she looked down at the picture and said, "I remember you always looking at your phone. Kids notice everything." Then she asked me something I don't think I'll ever recover from. "Did you sell our house because you didn't want me anymore?" I told her no so fast I almost choked on it. "No, baby, never." She nodded, but the question itself was the wound. That is what my addiction did. It made my daughter connect losing her home with losing my love. The court terminated my parental rights 3 months later. There is no dramatic way to say that. A judge read a decision. Lawyers spoke in careful language. My caseworker avoided my eyes. And just like that, the state decided the safest future for my daughter did not include me as her legal father. I want to say I got clean that same day and turned my life around with some perfect movie ending. I didn't. I fell apart first. Then slowly, I started doing the things I should have done earlier. Real recovery, real therapy, real meetings, real honesty. I stopped talking like I was the victim of bad luck and started admitting I had made a series of choices that kept putting my need to escape above my daughter's need for safety. I live in a recovery house now. I work full-time for a maintenance company again. I have a bus pass, a twin bed, and more humility than I ever wanted. I don't gamble. I don't carry cash unless I need it. I don't keep financial apps on my phone. My life is small and structured in ways I used to think were embarrassing. Now I understand structure is sometimes the only thing standing between a man and the version of himself that ruins everything. I still get occasional updates through Mrs. Carter, who stayed in touch with the foster family for a while. Nia is okay. She likes school. She still loves purple. She has a new backpack every year now. The family taking care of her has a yard. I am grateful for all of that. And that gratitude hurts. Because for a long time, I told myself I was gambling to give my daughter a better life. In the end, the better life she got was the one I was removed from. That's the truth of it. The casino didn't just take my money. It gave me a fantasy I wanted so badly that I kept mistaking risk for love. Every bad choice came wrapped in some version of the same excuse. I'm doing this for Nia. I sold the car for Nia. I sold the house for Nia. I chased the losses for Nia. I lied for Nia. What I was really doing was feeding my own desperation and using fatherhood to make it sound noble. If you had asked me at the beginning whether I would ever lose my daughter over online gambling, I would have laughed in your face. I loved her too much. That's what I would have said. Now I understand love is not measured by what you feel when you hold your child. It's measured by what you protect when you're tired, ashamed, tempted, and scared. I felt love. I just didn't protect her. That is the difference, and it cost me everything. I still keep one drawing she made before she was taken. It's folded and worn out at the edges. It shows me, her, and a little yellow house with smoke coming from the chimney. Above it, she wrote, in the shaky spelling of a 6-year-old, "Me and my daddy home." That house is gone. My rights are gone. My daughter's childhood with me is gone. And I have to live with the fact that none of it happened because I didn't care. It happened because I kept telling myself one more spin would save us. That is how addiction talks. And if you listen to it long enough, one day you wake up and the person you were trying to provide for is safer without you than with you.